Right. Please take it away, Rob.
Thanks. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. Hello, Amy. Hi, Diane. Hi, Ben. It's great to see familiar faces. Um, wow. We have, let's see, this session is called Choosing a New Concept of God. So I assume we have 3 years for this session. So we might as well get started. Just a word, my services just ended, so my daughter and her friends may come bounding in here at one point just to say goodbye, but they're on their way. Hey, it's Rabbi Brian Mann. Hey, Rabbi Brian. Um, but they're on their way out to Yuntif lunch. So this topic is so very important to me in general, and it felt really on point for, where we are and this holiday of Shavuot. So Shavuot is the holiday where we celebrate Matan Torah. And I'll ask my learners, like, what does this mean? And they're like, it's when we receive the Torah. And I'm like, not exactly. Right. Which then we start a little argument. Um, and I want to point out for them and for you the difference between this holiday, which is called, where we are celebrating Matan Torah versus Kabbalat Torah, versus the idea of receiving Torah. The Torah is given on Shavuot, or rather, offered. For people who want a more gentle approach. And granted, I know that we have the midrash where it wasn't really offered. It was, thrust down our throats. In fact, God was holding the mountain over our heads and we had no choice. But the reality today that we're living in is that we do have a choice. Like it is so easy to not be Jewish these days. Um, Someone was just saying the other day, at this point, if we're opting into our Judaism, it's like we're all Jews by choice, which I agree with in some ways and disagree with in other ways, especially when, external forces remind us or force us to remember that we are Jews. It's like we don't have that choice. But in terms of our practice and how we do Jewish, we're opting in. So this idea of receiving Torah, right? It's gifted on Shavuot. This idea of receiving it, though, um, is predicated on a relationship and a relationship with the giver. And um, the quality, the depth with which we receive this gift depend on that relationship. And I want to share an example. Um, I am not big on receiving gifts. I love them. I think they're great. I say thank you for the gift. And oftentimes it will end up in the donation shop because I do not like to accumulate things. Um, and I like to accumulate experiences, which is actually related to what we're going to get to in a moment. But my mother went to a store and she came home with a fake orchid for me. Now I have a whole rant against fake plants in my house. Like I have a whole thing. Um, and I have a real orchid sitting over here, so like I had no need to have a fake orchid in my plant. Yet this fake orchid now lives in my kitchen because it was so lovingly and thoughtfully given to me by my mother, whom I love. And now, when she comes out of her room, she sees this beautiful plant, which she bought as a symbol of her love for me, whatever. So, Torah is kind of the same way. I don't want to say it's like a fake plant. However, we all do have different relationships with God. And we'll get into that word because for some people it could be completely triggering. And that affects how we receive this gift of Torah. Our tradition also tells us that Shavuot itself is a wedding. So there is a traditional expectation that this relationship is going to be very intimate. And I hazard the guess that for many people, it's not that intimate of an experience that they have with a personal concept of God. Um, for what it's worth, this idea of salvation um, feel, or I don't even want to say salvation, just like this idea of like having a personal relationship with God feels Christian for a lot of people, and that will rub people, Jewish people, the wrong way. And I'm saying this, based on, something I've read in this book that I love, The 12 Jewish Steps to Recovery. However, having a personal relationship and understanding of God, however we understand God, is an incredibly Jewish idea that we find in a lot of our Hasidic texts, that we find even in the words that are Kabbalistically understood between Adonai and Elohim, Adonai being that concept of a personally defined God, whereas Elohim is more that idea of like, God in the storm, God of the cosmos. It's to Adonai we would pray for a parking spot. That's how I understand it. And that's how I apply it. A parking spot when I'm running late, like when I really, when I'm running late to do a mitzvah, not like when I'm just going out to Target or something. I do make the differentiation. Um, so this is when we get to this concept of, so what is this Adonai? What is this God that we understand, and how do we understand it? And like I said in the course description in this book that I just held up, I'm coming to this through the lens of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, found in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll just say a word about how I ended up here. I was invited by a former congregant who, um, at right before Kiddush, I asked, oh, are you staying for Kiddush? And she said, no, Rabbi, I don't stay for Kiddush because I'm a compulsive overeater. And I was like, oh, but you can have a little bit because I didn't know any better. And then she invited me. She said, well, why don't you come to an OA, Overeaters Anonymous meeting? And so it's good for you to know as a clergy person. And I thought, I'm always happy to grow, my rabbinate. I'm always happy to learn more in ways of being of service. And so I sat down in this meeting, and it was Elul. It was, the month of Teshuvah. And I saw the 12 steps on the wall. And I thought, oh my gosh, these are just like Maimonides' steps of tshuva, but like a little bit elongated. And like, wait, you guys are doing this all the time? This is amazing. So, like, this is a very practical way of bringing tshuva into our lives every day, like our tradition says we're supposed to do, or don't even want to say supposed to, that we have a framework for doing. And I was like, wow, this is really great. So I love the 12 steps. And I love it because I am a deeply spiritual person. And these programs, whatever anonymous program, they are spiritual but not religious. And religion are the ways that we express our spirituality, but there's no central religious doctrine of any of these. It's predicated on finding the God of your understanding. How do you understand God? And I personally just ate that up. No, I didn't, because I also identify as a I enjoyed that this notion of God, how I understand God. And it spoke to my own theology. And I'm hoping that you're thinking about your own theology, because that in about 15-20 minutes we're going to do a little writing exercise, if that's your custom. If not, you can just think about it. Because I have always had an issue with the word God, and how people use it, and how people respond to it. Because for me, I have always felt that God, the word God, is a placeholder for an experience, which means we will inevitably have different experiences of God because we are all different people. And this is why in our tradition it also says, you know, we all heard at Sinai in a different way because the voices came to us in the ways that they needed to come to us. And in our tradition, we have a zillion different names for God, based on different experiences of God. And you may have heard this before. You know, the soldier or the warrior will call God Ish Milchama, a person of war, because that is their experience, and for them, that's the God experience that they need. Someone who's going to fight the battles, but someone who is in need of healing. Someone might call God Rahmana, source of mercy and compassion, related to the word rechem, the womb, right? Someone to encircle them with healing and nurturing, right? So our concepts of God are going to be varied because we as humans and our experiences are varied. And that also means they change because that person of war, you know, can also become a person who is sick and needs something else from the God, how they understand God. Um, so, in my experience, it's been very helpful to have flexibility around our understanding of God. And actually, our tradition demands this of us because, oh, yes, I see someone popping in here in the chat. Um, that we say in the Amidah, we say the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, the God of Yaakov, Davka, like explicitly to say that each of those people had a different relationship with God. Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, right. It's like this is so deeply in our tradition. Um, yeah, so as we have these conversations, and I know we already, thank you, Irina, for putting up the rules of engagement for this. Like through these conversations, we're not arguing with anybody about their beliefs, or about their God understanding, about their concepts. And I never engage in that stuff because we're all different. Like, who am I to say, you know, your God behaves like we're just all different, and that's part of accepting the plurality and the diversity of the universe. I wanted to share a couple of sources on this, and then we'll get into it. Get into our own writing practice, I should say. Oh, I don't have the scan of this. It's a bummer. Oh well, I'll just read it to you. Um, there are three books. It's funny. Let's take a step back. I prepared for this 1 hour session with 5 or 6 books. We're only going to get to three of them, but I want to, from the beginning, let you know what all of them are. I highly recommend them all. The first, like I said, is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The chapter called We Agnostics, I think is some of the best spiritual writing I've ever read. So I highly recommend that. The next one is Recovery, the Sacred Art. Um, the 12 Steps as Spiritual Practice by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Um, and this is where I'm going to start. But what I love about this book is he begins with, we're all addicted to something. You know, it's not just alcoholics or compulsive overeaters or gambling or dentists. We're all addicted to playing God and to trying to manage our lives and be in control. And if we're all trying to be God, that creates a problem when we run into another human who's also trying to play God. So he says we can all benefit from working these steps and backing off of that God and figuring out the God with whom we're actually in relationship. This is, I should say, you know, obviously one of my big go-to books around Shavuot, which here I am. So I'm going to read to you from, and I'm sorry I thought I had this scanned, but I don't have this scanned. I'm going to read from chapter 3, which is about the third step. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. On page 40, he says, what does 12 step have to say about God? Absolutely nothing. This program is not, none of these books are telling you anything. The success of working the steps, he says, isn't dependent on any theological proposition. Rather, it's dependent on you finding something or someone greater than yourself to whom you can be surrendered, which then opens up so many ideas. Someone, something, right? If sometimes people's God is a being, right? Okay, that's awesome. For some people, the community is the thing to whom they surrender. We do mitzvot because that's what our community practice is. The point is, it doesn't matter if it's God in a traditional sense, if it's the group that you are a part of, if it is Torah itself. God is whatever you need God to be in order to get beyond the insanity that rules our lives, right? And that idea of insanity ruling our lives is so on point today as we think about the Israelites who were coming into Sinai, right? Coming from being enslaved, having all of that trauma, and then being freed and sort of out in the world with absolutely no guidance, with no construct of what it means to be a free people, right? With no social situations, no social frameworks. And so on Shavuot, we get that ultimate social framework, the Torah. But then we have to understand, like, why? Where is this coming from? And that's the relationship. This defining of God, however we understand it, that helps us deepen our practice and the meaning of that practice of Torah. Further on page 41, he says, actually, I want to give a quote from the big book really quickly. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified, this feeling of antipathy. I didn't like that idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, or universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with other people who felt the same way. So in the big book, they're acknowledging that, like, that is not always the idea of God that sits with people. And in fact, I love Reb Zalman Alav Shalom, who's the father of renewal Judaism, would often say, I also don't believe in the God you don't believe in, you know, because we make a lot of assumptions that if we don't feel a certain way, other people must feel a certain way, and I don't feel that way, right? But in this concept of the 12 steps, and also what Lori pointed out, even in our Amidah, it's a foundational thought that we all have different experiences and relationships with the divine. So Rami Shapiro goes on, what allowed Bill W. to use the word God was his radical notion that he could conceive of God as he wished, as Bill wished, excuse me. Step 3 invites you to become your own theologian, to create an idea of God that allows you to trust in something greater than yourself. Um, it's this that makes the 12 steps a spiritual discipline, but also makes many people, religious and non-religious, nervous. They might say, if we know we're imagining God or envisioning God according to our own understanding, how do we know that we're surrendering to a true God, the true God? The Reverend Myra, an Episcopal priest with a history of prescription drug abuse, once said to me, when it comes to God in 12-step recovery, we are like the proverbial blind men and the elephant. We each have a piece of the truth, but the whole escapes us. Are people familiar with the story of okay, great. So like, that's it, right? Like we reach out and we touch exactly what we can, but we don't ever grasp the whole. Again, that's why we come together in community. Because if we're each grasping something and we come together and we have these conversations, you can add to what I know. Yeah. And it changes through our lives, right? It changes as we grow, or not even grow, as we experience things differently. So I want to share with you a couple of different theologies because we are about to create our own theologies. These are not Torah Misinai, meaning they can change. You are not committed to them. It's just a place to begin and to understand your relationship. Perhaps it's a part of your ketubah, the wedding contract that we draft here on Shavuot. This practice is called 100-word theologies. You have 100 words, no more, no less. Because sometimes when you talk about God, you might have, if you're like me, you have a zillion words to say about the topic. Or if you're like other people I know, you've got 5 words to say on the topic. So this gives you the opportunity to say 100 words exactly. So for this, you will need a pen and a pad. You'll get a little time to get those things. You don't have to run and get them now. I do want to share a couple of theologies for your inspiration. Let me share my screen. Share. Okay. I can see you can see that. Okay. So we're not going to read all of these. Rabbi Menachem Creditor says, God is the collective potential of the human imagination. Every good thing every person has ever yearned for and will ever yearn for is what I mean by the word God. My God doesn't send cancer or hurricanes or people to hurt others. When a person dies, a fragment of divine potential is lost. When I ask God to embrace my lost loved one, I cry to my community that every life matters. I love you means that I am not alone and that I am here so that you need not be either. That, for me, is God. Whereas Rabbi Daniel Ruttenberg says, my theology is, I don't know. I've had powerful experiences of transcendence that, as I interpret them, substantiate my sense of the divine as the vast interconnectedness of all being, and maybe more than that. But am I right? I'll never be sure. We must engage theology with humility and an awareness that things may be messy and complex as we try to make sense of ultimate reality from a deeply subjective place. Our understandings reflect the imperfect filters through which we view the world. I'm always suspicious of those who claim certainty or that they have all the answers. Okay, so that's just two. And so I invite you, it's okay if you have something that's defined. It's okay if you have nothing and this is really a challenge. I think either way, it is a great opportunity to put some words on paper and start spinning these wheels for this Chag. So we will take, we will take 100 words. Let's take 10 minutes to start. We'll check in and see how we're doing because, it might take a while to get started. And if we need a minute or two more, then we'll get then we'll take that minute or two. You do not have to share. If you would like to share, we can, how many are we? We can take a few if you'd like to share, but there is by no means any pressure. You don't even have to share all of it. You could share about the experience of writing this. And then we'll have some closing text. How does that sound? Good. All right. I'm going to set a timer then for 10 minutes. No, I'm not. My thing's going to keep loading and spinning. Yep, there it is. Great. Okay. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes for us. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Are we ready? Here we go. Friends, that's about 10 minutes. So, have we either approached 100 words or gone well over 100 words at this point? Are we at a stopping point? Do we feel like we can come back?
Yeah, we're here.
All right. All right. Let me remove the timer then. And then we can share. Um, so what's a few guidelines then for our sharing. As I said before, you're not married to this. This is right now. um, and you're welcome to share about the process for you of what it was like putting this on paper. If it was easy, great. If it was challenging, great. You can also read your 100 words. So, and we'll just take, because we don't have all the time in the world. If you can limit your sharing to 2 minutes, that would be fantastic. All right. David, let's hear it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi. I love this. I know it's unfair, but I'm a writer, so it just came pretty easily. So I'm going to take less than 20 minutes, 2 minutes, and share 80 words. So I wrote, my understanding of God starts with the journey to know who and what I am. On this quest, I was delighted to find that God appears and speaks to me in many forms, simply when I am quiet and still and open my heart to receive his message. When I invite him in, he can appear. Yes, I vision him and communicate in a loving, playful way with an inventory of expression only unlimited by my imagination. Yes, my imagination I am grateful for that he gave me when he created me.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Ben, would you like to share?
Sure. I have the uh, caveat that I'm outside for a bunch of reasons. So if it doesn't come through, but here we go. Can you still hear me? Okay. I don't know about God or think about God as much as I feel about God. I do take comfort in a God who knows everything and is all good. And I accept that God created the world as close to good as God could, but she made it with rules that even she can't break. I relate to God as a loving parent, an ideal version of my own, who thus demands that I love every person as I love myself in all my roles: husband, parent, son, son in law, American, Jew, and rabbi. That's it.
I love these. I'm like, we should put these together. This is great. I would love to read these like in shul. Thank you, Ben. And I love that piece that you said. I don't think about God. I feel about God. I love that. Thank you. Karen.
Okay, here goes. It's a little under 100. When I feel awe, I feel God. Awe can be beautiful or terrible, but is always powerful. The amazement at the Grand Canyon or at dew on a blade of grass, the joy of feeling understood and accepted, or in fully welcoming another person into my heart, and the heartbreak and pain that comes with loss. Then there is the incredible feeling of being in a room where everyone is singing, and there is the calm and stillness of being alone in a forest. And then there is sex and art and chocolate. These are God for me. I'm not sure you can read that in synagogue.
Sure, why not? We'll just keep going with the kids. Love it. Thank you. Marla. Marla, you're still with us?
Oh, I didn't notice the unmute button.
Oh, that's fine.
Belief in a higher power, which I call God, keeps me tied with my past, gives me hope for the future, and allows me to make today a meaningful existence. I find comfort in prayer and being part of a community. I do not believe that God zaps my wishes into being, but rather many times in my life, people or circumstances come my way which assists me on my journey. And sometimes my unanswered prayers mean his answer is no.
Mm.
Thank you. Mm. Yeah, sometimes the answer is no. I just want to reflect back something, and then Ellen, I see your hand. And feel free to jump in, raise your hands if you want to comment on the process or you just want to say a word. Um, what feels so delightful in hearing all what you've written is that it's personal.
Mm.
And no one, I mean, people can argue, but you really can't argue with someone saying, this is my experience. Um, and that's for me what makes it feel so delectable and easy to receive. So thank you for all sharing. Ellen.
I wrote a little longer, so I'm trying to condense, and I'm leaving out a tiny bit, so just want to put that in there. And it still might be longer. But that isn't the kind of God I want, an absent father or overbearing, overloving mother. I create or co-create. Here's the word, find and thus seek, a God of gentling, a loving, soft, firm hand of correction, like a parent guiding tiny child hands on the bowl and cake or flour bread mixing spoon. Not saying like this prompt that there is one didactic way to God, but that we experience the multiplicities of the wondrous celestial ways of God. When I think of God, she's like the cosmos, 1,000 exploding and shining stars. She is like that moment on the back deck at Waterville with dew on the grass, me with my plate of food, my bleeding rock on the far corner, Mount Tecumseh in front of me, the grandmother Mountain Osceola to the far north. That moment of dew and light and Becky's words, spirituality. Oh, this is what she meant by spirituality. And then the God-killing pesticides began, an assault on my land and body, a journey through hate and pain and bodily devastation for over 30 years, only eventually to find God, spirit on the other side of those starry and auroral skies, the dew, the next morning, the divine.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you. Elisa?
Hi, hello. Is 110 words acceptable?
Sure. I'm not policing.
All right, sounds good. So I'll just read from what I have here. I was able to come up with real quick. Whatever Hashem's true form and name may be is not discernible to me. What I do know is that Hashem reaches down into our knowledge sphere and our world in the form of the Yetzer Tovah. Positive creation in all its good contexts is a presence of Hashem that I can detect the most. If Hashem is truly an actual being, I believe they exist on a physical, mental, and narrative dimension far above ours that we can't really see the full nature of. In addition, I believe that the name Ahaya Asher Ahaya, translated as I will be however I will be, is relevant as the only true name of Hashem that objective name that I recognize, as it encourages continuous revelation after Sinai in both secular and religious ways.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Lori, do you want to share yours? Or apart from it? I want to hear it.
Okay. It came out at 251 words before I even realized, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but
Do I even believe in God? I would like to think there is something beyond me. I would like to think we are not alone. I would like to feel a relationship with a caring God to whom I can give up my desire for or illusion of control. But do I? I yearn for the kind of relationship with the divine that some of my friends have. I'm not sure how to get there. Did I ever feel it? Even when I was living as a modern Orthodox Jew, I don't think I felt connected to God. I felt connected and supported by the community, the rituals, the learning, but I'm not sure I ever really felt God. When I was separated and then divorced from my husband, I continued going to our shul because my kids had friends there, as did I. For an entire year, I could not pick up a siddur. I sat there and railed against God. Why was this happening to me? Why was he getting support and I was dropped? Why didn't people see how awful he was to me and the children? After a year, I realized that God had not abandoned me. Even though I could not use the traditional words of the siddur, I had been in conversation with God the whole time, and God had remained with me. How do I get that feeling back?
I love that. I love that you're writing out of the question. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Diane, here you're muted.
I didn't write because I get stuck always in this question in one place. And so I just kind of contemplated. Where I get stuck is, who's bigger, humans or what we call God? And is that an important enough question? And what I think about is that often in traditional notions of God, it makes people smaller. And I don't know that there's really a need for some bigger force, but there is a need for collective characteristics. And I think that there's an awareness that's beyond intelligence that humans are capable of. And I think that we have a desire to be aware that there are qualities larger than us that are universal. I wouldn't take out universal, but just larger than us, bigger than us, that has to do with goodness, kindness, compassion, and an aware intelligence that can think about the whole of existence, not just one part of it. And so I always think God, goodness, it's funny, those two words, together, but that as humans, we struggle with evil. And how does that exist in a universe of goodness? And I think it's important to really see it as absolutely good, that there is something that we can call absolutely good. And that we and our capabilities and are not limited, but helped by it. I think traditionally God created humans and humanistically humans created God. But I think there's a going together. It might not be the important issue. Neither is limited. And their whole is with each other. So that's kind of the random thoughts I had that I didn't write down.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing, Diane. I'm going to make you write them down next time we're together.
Okay. The deal. The deal.
Oh, did I see, Amy, was your hand up?
It was, but I sort of chickened out, but now that you caught me, now that you caught me, I'll do it. This is mine, and it is just under 100 words. I see God as community, And separately, God is all around and in people. God is in relationships. During silent prayer, I'm able to talk to God because I'm alone with God and with others. Silent prayer at Friday night services, which is my experience with God changes depending upon what I'm experiencing. I found that it's renewed during the silent prayer, and I'm able to talk to God while others are there giving me strength. I've given up on God, and God doesn't leave me, which is something I've not experienced.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for calling on me after I took down my hand. Appreciate it.
Come on back in.
Is that me?
Yeah, your hand is up. Did you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly we talked at the beginning about the mountain over their heads coerced version of Revelation, and it just I remember learning near the end of rabbinical school. There's a close. There is a free acceptance, but it happens hundreds of years later. Near the end of the book of Esther, it says that Mordecai and Esther sent out the rules of Purim, and it says that kimu v'kiblu, they accepted and they received. And received is an unnecessary verb there. But the Talmud says that that was when they actually freely, finally received Torah. So all the years of the kingdoms and exile, everything else, was the process of getting ready to really freely receive it. And what just occurs to me today is, bucking to get today again in the Torah reading, women aren't at Sinai according to the version. It says the women are supposed to be kept separate. But to have the final revelation happen through Mordecai and Esther is this most gender inclusive version that Torah was finally accepted by Beit Yaakov, like all the whole people, men and women, finally centuries later accepted Torah.
Ben, that's an amazing chidush. That's an amazing insight. And I'm so curious. We don't have time for this now, so we'll talk about this offline. But I'm also really curious about like the power of that in the book of Esther, where God is not mentioned. Like, what is that about? And it's like now we can fully realize Torah. Like, what does that even mean? Okay. So we only have 5 minutes left. So I wanted to offer to you some things to do with these, scribbles that you have. I just recently went to a visioning session with someone. It's not relevant, but what she said is that just putting things down on paper now changes our awareness of those things. So, from whatever place that we're in, this theology, let it exists. It is now a thing. Let this version, I want to say God you. Like that's the verb that we have at the end of Vayahim Shemoah, Vahayim Shemoah, right? Like lihiot lahem lalohim, right? Like God took us from Mitzrayim in order to God us. So let this theology be your God for today. And in a couple of days, in a couple of weeks, the next Rosh Chodesh, maybe on Shabbat, maybe you want to bring it out for the high holidays. At some point, revisit this. And maybe it's time to write a new one. And if you want to write a new one in a couple of days, let this one be. This one is great and perfect. And this is the reflection of what you believed or did not believe or questioned from 1 to 2 p.m. on Shavuot. Like this is a document. But I encourage you to continue to grapple lovingly with the God of your understanding. Because as we say, as it says in the big book, and as it says in Ashrei, Karov Adonai L'chol Korav L'chol Asher Yikra'uhu Ve'emet, that God, however we understand God, can and will draw close to us whenever we reach out and try and call out from wherever we currently are, as long as we're doing it from a place of emet, a place of truth and a desire of truth and real want of connection. So I encourage you to do that. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your theologies with me. They have come into me, I have received them, and I feel blessed by all of your sharing. So, Chag Sameach. And I turn it back over to Irina, who I think will hold space for the next session. Don't eat too much dairy, friends.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Tiferet. That was totally awesome.